Hello and welcome back. We are going to be discussing innovation within the broader topic of strategic management. And for this, there are three different issues we are going to be covering. One is what is innovation? What is innovation in general? What are the different types of innovation? And from there, a broader discussion away from just the pure innovation into the bigger analysis of technological evolution and diffusion. And from there, the concept of disruptive innovation. So with this, let's start with innovation. What is this? Commercialization of inventions. Something that you create that is new product, new service, and then you take this to market. And this is the important thing. An invention, you create something new, it's solving a new need, that is fantastic. Only when you basically take this product, this service, and then start selling it, creating the basis of a business or improving an existing business, you basically end up with what is an innovation. So with this, let's look at different types and the difference between innovation and invention. And there is a very clear, if you want, story here in the case of what happened with Xerox Alto, which according to history is one, if you want, of the early sources of innovation for what we now consider to be standard computers. It had a mouse, so you could basically move it around. It has a visual user interface. You had a monitor. You basically could interact with it directly. It had the graphic software. You could network with it. You can send emails, what we call now emails. You could remove the data storage and basically add some more. In terms of printing, what you saw on the screen is basically what you got when you're printing. Fantastic idea. It worked very well. The only challenge, or one of the challenges they faced, was that, well, it was $12,000. It was a really nice prototype. It was used in the company and some universities. And then that was pretty much it. What happened with this? Well, there was a delegation coming from Apple Computer, including Steve Jobs. They visited and they observed, and from there they basically thought, oh, this is so fantastic. Can we do something similar to this so that we can just reduce the prices enough? And from there, that's when they introduced the mouse, the visual interface, the graphic software, and that was, if you want, the beginning of the personal computer revolution as a very easy tool to use. We don't associate the early computing to Xerox, even though they are the ones who basically invented it, but they failed to commercialize it. They failed to make this invention into an innovation that had a big market. So this is, if you want, the clear example I'd like to introduce. And let's get into a variety of different types. So let's start very simple ones. Products versus process. Are you improving an existing product or a service that you're selling, or are you improving the way in which you are making this product? Simplest comparison, electric vehicles. We are replacing the engine that powers a car away from internal combustion into something that is going to be electric. You can also improve the process for electric cars or internal combustion by basically improving how you make them, the just-in-time production process, in which you only get the parts that you need at the right time, and then things move much more smoothly, and you basically, with this process, also increase the quality. So product versus process. Let's get into other types of innovations. Competence enhancing versus destroying. And this is innovation for whom? The tricky part here, the thing to remember is same type of innovation can help companies that are using that innovation and can also basically undermine, if you want, the competitors. Example, ride-hailing and Google, we have an innovation. There is a new service, which is ride-hailing. I'm using the smartphone, and this complements Google because they have all, if you want, the infrastructure for developing maps. So we are going to complement each other. We are going to improve both, if you want, kind of services. At the same time, the story of taxi fleets, in which I had to get a medallion, I had to get a permit, and people will basically call me to get the taxis undermined because all of a sudden there is so much more competition coming from private drivers. So same innovation, ride-hailing, can be enhancing because it complements and basically improves some other products, or it can be destroying because for, if you want, competitors, it undermines their ability to continue operating. Some more innovations. Let's get into radical versus incremental. Incremental, you are improving things and there's nothing wrong with it. And this can be very powerful. You continue improving the efficiency, effectiveness of particular products. For example, engine efficiency, you can extract so much more additional power from the same type of or same size of engine. Something that is radical, completely different, autonomous vehicles. We are basically used to driving our own cars. Can we implement a different type of use of that particular product in which the product is going to be driving by itself? So incremental, continuous improvement, radical, complete departure from what used to be the case before. Others, component versus architectural. Am I changing some parts, but overall, the product pretty much stays the same? Or am I changing how things interact with each other? Component innovation, hybrid vehicles. What's good about them is that, look, you don't really have to change much of what happens in the car. The only thing that is basically being different is the hybrid motor, in which now you can have basically both the electric motor as well as an internal combustion engine, but everything else stays the same. Just replace the engine. And in some cases, we don't really know that you have a hybrid car unless you're basically driving it. From the outside, you cannot see that it is going to be different. And when you see inside, all the parts are going to be pretty much staying the same. Different story with electric vehicles. All of a sudden, yes, you can pull, if you want, the motors all the way to the tires. You don't really have to have the motor in front, or in some cases in the back. You can redesign everything. You just have a battery pack connected to the motor. There isn't really the need for just a big block, an engine block in front of the car. And from there, the world, if you see, the sky's the limit, if you want, how you are going to reorganize things. All of a sudden, the components, the way they interact is completely different. Other types of innovation, frugal and reverse. What is happening here is not one or the other. And this is, if you want, another subtlety. The argument for frugal innovation is that, well, there is a very large market which is not willing or is not able to pay for the innovation because they have relatively low levels of income. Can I find a way to improve a product and basically not only give them something that is new and better, but also at a really low price? A traditional example, if you want, the Tata Nano, which was an automobile developed by the Tata Group in India. And this was basically touted as, oh, this is the cheapest car in the world. And it was at the time. It was basically designed to be sold at a profit. And this is important. This was a commercial company at a price that was under $2,000. Yes, eventually the prices went up and things like this. But the idea was at the time, prices of cars in alternative models were basically 5,000, 6,000, 7,000. So you're all of a sudden really reducing the price. At the same time, it was relatively tall. They moved the wheels to the corners. Small engine, 600 plus cubic centimeters. It went to the back, but nevertheless, the idea was, look, this is a big improvement over what at the time was the target market, which was really poor people that at most had motorbikes. And motorbikes in which they will just, in many cases, not be very safe. And all of a sudden, well, if you put not only the person in the motorbike, but the family that used to ride with them in a car, it is going to be safer. It's going to be better for everybody. You can basically move more people, and it's going to be also very easy to run. Reverse innovation, when ideas that are developed for the most part, individuals in emerging economies end up coming back to advanced economies. And the logic here, and this is, if you want, something that we can question, the idea is that for the most part, innovations are trying to look for those people who have relatively high levels of income and are willing to take something that is new. They want the newest, the best, something that is going to solve new needs. In some cases, those innovations are coming, and this is the story, in advanced economies, and then they trickle down to emerging markets. The idea here is that it doesn't have to be the case. Innovations can emerge in emerging economies, focusing on those, if you want, bigger markets, and then eventually people in advanced economies also like them. Example, dockless bicycle sharing. And the idea mostly coming from China was that, look, you want to share a bicycle, it is nice, you want to pay for it. In advanced economy, what we had is that you had to take them to a dock. You went to the dock, you basically paid to release the bicycle, then use it, and then you had to bring it back. Then it was, why do we need this? This is more infrastructure. It's going to limit the number of bicycles we have there, and then it's going to also constrain the ability to use the bicycle wherever you want. So why don't we just create a system in which we don't really need to bring it anywhere? But with a smartphone, you just unlock the lock that is already in the bicycle, use it, leave it wherever you don't need it anymore, and then somebody else is going to pick it up because it's basically connected and you can find it. And that was the story of dockless bicycle sharing that eventually made its way into advanced economies, and they basically spread. And now, although it was undermined, if you want, later on by logistics and profitability challenges, but it was the idea that this is something that can work elsewhere. And then let's get away from not only just innovation types, but a broader discussion of types of innovations in terms of platforms versus pipeline. And this, to some extent, reflects a broader discussion. The idea, most of the innovation tends to be, if you want, the pipeline in which one thing goes to the next, to the next, to the next, is the market, the idea of the market in which input, output, things move along, and as a result of the payment is also going to be moving along. Platform innovations, platform business models, two-sided markets. The idea here is that some companies are not just going to be taking things from suppliers and then doing something to them and then selling them to buyers, but are going to be connecting suppliers and buyers. That's the business model in which there are lots of different suppliers and buyers. I am just the intermediary connecting the transactions among them. This is basically pretty much what has happened. The ride-hailing app, the example we had before, is a platform model in which, instead of traditional, if you want, taxi companies, I have a company, I own, control the taxis, and then I provide services to customers. I am in the middle. I'm going to be connecting lots of people who have cars and they have spare time, and they want to basically make a little bit of money using their car, and lots of people who need transportation services. And then I just basically match them and then just take some cut and then do the matching thanks to the smartphone and things like this. The idea is changing the way in which we are connecting markets, away from the things coming input, output, one way, and now we are connecting, we are in the middle. This is a platform innovation. Let's now get into technology evolution. So all of these are different types of innovations, commercialization of inventions. Technology evolution, how does technology emerge? Innovations emerge, and eventually they get diffused. This is a story of diffusion. And the idea here, and this is one key important concept, dominant design. What is this? It's a type of design that is basically used by pretty much everybody. The idea here is that we are going to have lots of ferment of different innovations. For the most part, they are going to be incompatible. Eventually, one of them shows that it has some level of superiority in the features or the preference that customers have, and then eventually gets adopted. And what happens is that there is a transition away from lots of different products that are highly innovative, and now we converge into this is the type of product that we are going to do. And then there is a second wave, if you want, of innovation, which is mostly coming from the process. Okay, now that we have decided this is basically the standard, let's get into efficiencies. Let's try to basically reduce the cost of production, and then with that, open it to a bigger market. Example, once upon a time, some 130, 40 years ago, we're talking now about the car industry. And we ended up with three different alternative sources of power. One was internal combustion engine, which was a new technology. It was using petroleum derivatives. It was basically burning them. Yes, it was a really nice technology. However, at the time, it was kind of complicated to operate. You needed a crank and you need a lot of force to basically change gears. But nevertheless, it was a huge improvement over having horses. The alternative also was an existing technology that was then compressed and made smaller, and that was a steam engine. We had already well-developed technology for railroads and machinery in factories, and then, oh, well, just make it smaller and then have just some coal and water and then basically run it. That is well established. Yes, it was good. However, the challenge is that, well, it takes a while for the fire to basically start being hot enough so that the steam, the water can basically evaporate, become steam, and then run it. And then it had some limitations in the amount of water that they needed to basically run long distances. We also had a third technology, which was electricity. We had battery-operated cars, some 120 years ago, 130 years ago, in which, well, you had a battery, you could charge it and then run it around for some time. Cars were very light at the time. And then there were two models, one in which, well, there were taxi operations in New York. You go a cam and basically replace the battery and then continue running the taxi or recharge it. Either way, the idea was, oh, this is really nice. It's very quiet. It doesn't produce fumes. So this was something that worked well. What happened? Eventually, the internal combustion engine won. Why was this? Well, because look, all of a sudden, yes, electricity is fantastic. It is quiet. Basically, it's much better if you want as a technology. However, it had big limitations in the sense that the batteries did not have enough capacity for long distance travel, and there wasn't a widespread electricity network outside cities. So it was kind of, where do I charge my car? In the case of internal combustion, it was relatively simple. Look, you can pretty much use any kind of fuel. At the time, there was a widespread distribution of kerosene. Eventually, that became gasoline. In the case of a steam engine, it was not very convenient because you needed basically to get coal and especially enough water to run it around. The result, lots of different alternatives converging into one particular type of design, internal combustion, and then from there, huge process improvements. That's when Ford comes with the production of the Model T, making it extremely efficient, dropping the prices, and then that was continuous improvements over internal combustion. So the idea here is there is going to be a new the creation of something completely new, or a huge improvement in innovations, lots of different alternative standards, and eventually one of them wins. Once that particular dominant design wins, what we see is now another second wave of innovations, mostly in the process, so that they are going to be able to reduce the cost of creating the products and then selling them in the market. So let's get now into adoption. Okay, so yes, this is a process of, if you want, technology diffusion. One of them is there's going to be a dominant design that gets selected somehow. The question is, how is this going to be selected? And this is a story of technology adoption and under which conditions does an innovation replace another. And here the idea is not, oh, you just have to have an innovation and everybody's going to take it. Yes, that's really nice, but it depends on not only the value added that is creating for customers, but also what is happening with all the complementary goods. And the sense, I mean, relatively abstract, let's pull it down. Yes, this new technology is superior to the previous one. Of course, horseless cars are superior to horses because they basically can pull weight around. You don't really need an animal. It can be waiting for you anywhere. You don't really have to take care of it. It's just easy access to, if you want, an alternative means of transportation. So there might be some improvements. That the question is, well, I already have an established infrastructure. Can I have that complementary set of goods to basically enable me to improve it? So this is a story, if you want, of cars, and why is it that it has taken so long for, if you want, the second revolution in electric cars to appear? And partly the argument is this, that yes, of course, an electric car is going to be nicer, it's going to be quieter, it's better for the environment. However, there were some limitations in the battery technology. So, well, it's going to, how many miles can I get out of this before I need to charge? And there were huge concerns, not so much in terms of the technology per se, but also all the installed base and especially the complementary assets. Can I get somewhere in which I can charge the car other than charging, if you want, in my garage? And this was a story of concerns of consumers that, look, yes, electric cars are really nice, but what if I want to go on a long distance drive? If I have an internal combustion engine, very simple. There are lots of gas stations everywhere. All I have to do is stop by, and in 5-10 minutes, I'm completely, I have fueled the car. Electric cars, well, there might be not enough infrastructure, and then it's going to take so much longer. It's, yes, a quick charge might take half an hour. If you want a full charge, you're going to be there for several hours. It's not the technology, the innovation of the car, but basically the story of complementary technologies and also the installed base. Okay, if there is an electric car and it has a problem, where can I fix this? Garages for internal combustion cars, lots of them, extremely skilled operators that can fix it very quickly. All of a sudden, you bring the electric car. They haven't experienced this. How do we develop this? So this is a story of, yes, you are going to see this, if you want, changes from one technology to the next, but it's not only the focus on the particular technology that we need to say, oh, this is so much more innovative, but also what happens with everybody's else system base and what happens in terms of complementary goods. Can you also basically provide those complementary goods? So it's just a different set of value-added activities, not just the one that is coming from the innovation. That's why you end up, in many cases, waiting for a long time until what is happening now with electric cars, in which, yes, now we have an established base of charging stations, so there is less reluctance to get an electric car because you know that, well, you are going to find a place in which you can charge the car in case that you need to basically get some electricity into it. So let's continue with this story of technology evolution, and then different, if you want, views of the market and who is adopting this. And here, in terms of individuals, who is adopting innovations? Well, we have early adopters, innovators that really like them. They're willing to basically take anything that is coming out in the market because they really appreciate something that is going to be new. And then the question is, can we, and this is important, go through the chasm of innovation in which in some cases, yes, there is a lot of early adoption, but it doesn't go into the early majority. There are improvements that are not quite there. Yes, I can have my electric car because I have a house, I have a garage. I'm using this mostly for commuting. Long distances is not something I'm going to be using it for because I have an alternative car. It's only when all of a sudden, yes, it's not only people with a garage, but also you can go and charge the car in different stations. Then we basically go away from the just early adopters with a few cars to an early majority who appreciate the innovation. And then eventually there is a late majority that, well, yeah, okay, so now a lot of people are having electric cars. It seems as if this is kind of a safe purchase, so let me just buy it. And eventually there are some laggards. This is basically in terms of different types of individuals and how they have different attitudes towards innovations and their attitude towards adoption of innovation. Then if we just add all of these things, we are going to see the story of market penetration. How at the beginning things take some time, it's relatively slow. Eventually there is an acceleration and all of a sudden everybody's buying it, everybody's willing to buy it, and then there is a point in which eventually everybody achieves it. Market penetration gets at very high levels. We have basically incorporated that particular innovation. It has become the dominant design. Everybody's using it. Yes, this is nice. There is another, if you want, third curve in which it's not so much the rate of innovation or the type of innovation, type of people regarding innovation, but what we're talking about innovation. And this is the hype cycle of innovation, in which I have an innovation, I'm launching it at the beginning, it's just the first generation, everybody starts, oh, this is so good, this is so nice, it's so different, it's going to help us do things so much better. But then we started using it, and then the limitations appear, and then from all the positive news, then all of a sudden negative news start to appear. And then it's only when a second generation comes and it fixes the problems of the previous generation that eventually this basically gets solved, and people say, okay, now we had some problems, this is solved, now everything is going to be, if you want, going so much better, let's continue with improvements, and then there is, if you want, the general adoption. So this is understanding how there is a lot of discussion and if you want, the hype of innovation. If we put them one on top of the other, we basically have the three curves. Early adopters, yes, very few people, but everybody's thinking that this is going to change how we do things. That works very well, but the first generation doesn't really have all the features, or it's not as good as we think, and then there is a negative press, and in some cases, that's it. Some innovations never go beyond there. If those things get solved, well, if you want, the early majority starts adopting, there is an acceleration of adoption, and then at the same time, in terms of news and how things are being talked about it, yes, the problems we had before, they are not solved, so now everybody should be okay with it, and then we end up with just a full adoption. So let's now move into disruptive innovation. Interesting concept, and in the sense that it has a lot of impact, but in the initial interpretation is not quite how we tend to think about disruptive, in the sense that, oh, disruptive is anything that changes things. Yes, but in terms of, if you want, the authors of the argument, or Christensen, Clayton Christensen, the story here is a particular type of a story in which we have very well established large companies that have really sophisticated products, and they have managed to basically create something really good. Everybody's using it. Now we have entrepreneurs that come up with a new story. It's not quite as good at the beginning. Nevertheless, let me try to improve it over time. Let me see if I can fix the different problems, and eventually I'm just going to be, for the most part, focused on those people who are underserved. Maybe they are not, they don't have the income to get, if you want, innovation, or they are basically in different markets. I'm going to go low, and eventually I will add better features, and as I improve it, it's going to go up. And eventually it's going to dominate the market. That's basically, if you want, the curve of innovation. How do we identify this? The story is a process, and this is an important thing, or qualification, if you want. It's not that it's a completely new way of doing things. It's not the product, it's the service, it's the process in which things are going to be changing over time. And the idea is, yes, the challengers are going to basically incorporate this, focus on those areas, customers which are underserved, and then try to understand and do things differently. It's a different type of business model. And then eventually, yes, I'm going to be threatened. Can I understand what the pain points of my customers are, and what is it that I'm not serving them with, and can I basically introduce something that is going to be new and different? At the beginning, not so. Point in time, the point I want to make is disruptive innovation is, for the most part, not so good at the beginning. Nevertheless, the rate of improvement is going to be so much faster. So, and this is, if you want, an illustration. Yes, at the beginning, I'm entering, is the performance is not as good, and they're not willing to pay for it. It's not quite, you are not really focusing on all my needs, but look, eventually, if I'm able to get around all the problems, this is going to have a much, if you want, a steeper trajectory of improvement, and eventually I'm going to become the dominant player here. So that's the story of disruptive innovation. Yes, the example, mini meals, in which at the beginning they were not as sophisticated, that integrated mills, I mean, steel mills, but eventually the rate of innovation basically made them so much more efficient. So with this, how can you respond if you are responding, for example, in the case of companies that are coming with new business models? Well, it depends on how you are basically understanding this. There has been a huge change, and this is digital transformation. That has affected lots of different business models. At the beginning, it was not as, if you want, convenient to just wait for the package to come from, for example, Amazon, because you had to wait several days instead of just going to the store. But eventually that basically accelerated. What can, if you want, the retailers do about it? Well, you can basically try to fight back. You can basically try to replicate, if you want, their business model, imitate, understand it. You can also get into, well, we have so much more convenient. It is, you can return things, you can try things like this. So try to highlight how you are the better, or you can try to find basically an alternative story and or basically decide that, well, we are not going to be able to operate anymore. So let's just get out of this. So with this, what's the story today? Innovation, we have an invention, you create something new, and then you sell it. And lots of different types of innovations. It depends on the different, if you want, criteria. But the thing to remember is, yes, on top of having innovations, these innovations are going to be diffused. How do we understand this? And there is a story of technology evolution, and there is a story of dominant designs and the adoption of those innovations, and the story of the different curves that basically explain this. And this, the second, if you want, big idea, disruptive innovation, is something that comes in, it's not as good as what's there in terms of features and sophistication, but the rate of improvement is so much higher that eventually it's going to be supplanting what is already in the market. That's it. Thank you very much for listening.